Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's Planning and Highways Committee. Before we move to the formal business, for the benefit of those joining us online, I am Councillor Sandra Pickin and I am the Chair of this Planning and Highways Committee. I'm also joined by Councillor Stuart Eptonstall, who is the Deputy Chair, and members Ellis, Jones, Swift, Tennant King, Wallace, Whitehouse and Williams. The committee also has support today's meeting from Kevin Winter, our planning solicitor, together with Ian Pollard, our planning service manager, Ruth Thackeray, team leader, Michael Eagleston, principal planning officer, will be introducing the planning applications before us today. Before we move to the formal agenda items, I'd just like to confirm today's meeting procedures. We will take each item on the agenda in the order, copies of which have been provided to members and is also available on the Council's website. Could I please ask members that they look at the additional information? I would like to remind colleagues alongside those registered speakers who are participating in today's meeting to ensure that your microphone is on mute throughout the meeting unless invited to speak, to minimise the potential background noise disrupting the meeting broadcast. In accordance with Council meeting procedure rules, my ruling as Chair during the debate will be final. When invited to speak, members of the committee, I've just got a new one coming in, sorry. I will also ask questions to do so at the appropriate time in the meeting, and all members should now be familiar with the procedures in place to indicate they wish to ask a question or comment on matters before us. At the end of the debate on the planning applications, I will call for a vote to be undertaken. In order for all parties to be clear as to how the vote has gone, I will invite the committee officer, Claire Box, to undertake a roll call. Claire will ask each member by name to confirm their vote. This will be achieved by members turning on their microphones individually and stating clearly for, against or abstain. Claire will summarise the result at the end of the roll call. If everyone is happy, then I shall proceed with the formal business. Agenda item 1 is Chair's announcements. I would like to remind everyone that this meeting of the Planning and Highways Committee are not public meetings. They are, however, council meetings held in public, and only those registered to speak will be allowed to do so at their allotted time. During the course of the meeting, it may be necessary to adjourn for a short period. If this is needed, then I will indicate this clearly to the committee, and if required, request that we pause the broadcast during the adjournment. After each application today, we will take a short break while officers change presenters. As we have no urgent items before us today, I will move on to item 3. Do any members have any interest to verbally declare in the matters raised today? I will take your silence as a no. Thank you. Agenda item 4 is to receive apologies for absence. Can I ask Claire if there are any apologies?
Chair, apologies from Councillors Blizzard, Hepworth and Sanders. Councillor Harvey is hoping to join the meeting later, and Councillors Jones and Whitehouse will be leaving the meeting earlier.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 5 is to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. Do I have a mover and a seconder?
Move, Chair.
Second, Chair.
Thank you. I'll take your silence as all in favour. Thank you. Agenda item 6 is to consider planning applications brought for us today. We have 3. And our first one is Wakefield North. Is it John Holmes? John Holmes will present today. Thanks, John. All right, sorry, it's Ruth. Sorry, Ruth.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so I've shared my screen. Please let me know if you can't see the slides in front of you. So the first item is for Clayton Hospital in Wakefield. The application relates to the former Clayton Hospital site and the applicant seeking consent for reserved matters relating to the enabling phase of this development. Outline planning permission was granted in 2007 for demolition of the majority of the existing buildings on site, with retention of the central section of the hospital pavilion, construction of a range of facilities for Wakefield Grammar School Foundation. The enabling phase, which is the phase we are considering today, comprises works to the pavilion building to preserve the fabric of the building to be retained and demolition of the remainder of the hospital buildings on site, provision of a main boulevard and associated hard and soft landscaping, car parking, a multi-use games area, perimeter boundary treatments, and laying of the proposed development plots to seed. So the application site is located in the centre of Wakefield with 2 frontages onto Wentworth Street and Northgate. Slide 1 here shows the hospital pavilion, and slide 2 is a view from within the site towards Wentworth Street. View 3 is a view towards Northgate, and properties to the north of the site are shown on view 4. Slide 5 shows the site viewed from Northgate, and slide 6 shows the southern boundary of the application site. So this is the proposed master plan for the enabling phase of development. So as I stated before, it comprises retention of the pavilion, which is this section here, parking within the site, so there are 2 car parks in this location, further car park with a frontage onto Wentworth Street with a new access created at this point, and then a small number of parking spaces along North Road Terrace. The proposal also includes a mugger, which is relocated in this part of the site, and a central boulevard will be created that runs through the middle. And as I said, that the rest of the site, where future phases of development will come forward, will just be laid to grass at this stage. This shows the parameters plan of the enabling works, setting out the key views of the development, mainly through the centre of the site, and the key frontage of the hospital pavilion. This is a proposed new access that will be created from Wentworth Street into the car park. And this just shows the master plan for the final development, but that isn't being considered as part of this application. So you can see the future development plots in this location, the sports hall, these are future plots, and an extension to the back of the pavilion building to create a performing arts centre, and glazed links will be provided between these development plots and the hospital pavilion. So this is the frontage of the hospital buildings at the moment. So this is the central pavilion range and the other buildings to either side. This shows the area being retained for future use. And this is just an indicative section of what the site could look like when it comes forward, but that isn't part of this application. So these are the development plots to either side of the hospital building. So this is just going back to the master plan for the enabling phase. Is here with us following a request from members when the outline application was considered for subsequent reserved matters applications to be brought to the committee. A design code and errata, a master plan and parameters plans have been submitted with the current application, which set out the parameters for the redevelopment of the site, and the phasing of the current enabling phase is set out within the agenda. The principle of demolition of the majority of the existing buildings on site was established under the outline application and is not being considered under the current proposal. It is, however, worth noting that the applicant has confirmed that additional sections at each end of the pavilion building will now be retained. So these are the sections here which Under the previous application, it was indicated that they could be demolished, but they will now form part of the development going forward. The details submitted in relation to the enabling phase of development, including provision of the central boulevard, the proposed boundary treatments and the hard and soft landscaping of the site, are considered to be acceptable and would ensure that the site would not detract from the appearance of the conservation area or nearby listed buildings, especially important during the period between completion of the enabling phase and future development phases. Further details will be required in regard to specific tree planting, and a condition is recommended. The mugger would have a polymeric soft surface in green to soften the appearance, with mesh fencing around the perimeter. The boundaries to the mugger will comprise 3-metre black mesh fencing, and an acoustic boundary will be provided to the north of the mugger facing North Road Terrace. The details of this will be agreed as part of a condition attached to the outline consent, along with details of lighting and a community use agreement for the mugger. The perimeter boundaries will comprise retention of the existing low stone walls with black ornamental railings, and ornamental gates will be provided to all vehicular and pedestrian access points into the site. The details submitted within the design code and errata, the master plan and parameters plans would provide an appropriate guide to ensure future phases of development achieve a high quality design and appearance that will enhance this historic location. The final details of materials are required to be submitted and approved through the conditions attached to the outline consent. The hospital's history and substantial development from 1880 to 1960 resulted in a number of key openings to new wards and hospital facilities, and as such there are a number of date stones of relevance around the site, and these are intended to be reused or to provide focal points in the site to retain some of the history. The memorial plaques from the benches located to the front of the site on Wentworth Street have been removed for safekeeping by Wakefield Grammar School Foundation, as regrettably the benches had been vandalised and subject to graffiti. The families involved have been contacted and advised of this, and the foundation have offered to relocate the plaques onto the new seating when installed, if they wish the school to do so. The applicant has confirmed the proposed parking within the site and along North Road Terrace will be for staff and will be managed and policed by the school. Internal parking will also be available to members of the public who use the facilities on site out of school hours, and again this will be managed and controlled by the school. A condition is recommended for submission of a scheme for the management of parking. The layout of the site access and parking and the impact on the local highway network have been assessed by the Council's highway section, and is considered that the proposal is acceptable. In conclusion, it's considered the proposed enabling phase would accord with relevant policy, and approval is recommended subject to the conditions set out within the committee agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ruth. We have 2 speakers registered today. Our first speaker is Mr. Basil Bashley.
Good morning, all. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you've got 3 minutes, Mr. Bashley, and we'll remind you when you get down to 30 seconds. You can put your video on now, please.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
The host has stopped the video link, so I think it's from your end. Sorry. Wait, from your end, it needs to be allowed. Oh, okay, that's great. Permission, brilliant. Oh, thanks very much. Yeah, good morning, all. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak. My name is Basil Basray. My wife and I own the residential property on the corner of Wentworth Street and North Road Terrace. so the new development is relevant to us. We have owned the property for over 20 years since the hospital was occupied and endured a number of years after it was vacated, living next to this derelict site. So we're not objecting to in principle of the development. In fact, we're looking forward to the demolition of the site and the construction of the new facilities. Our main concern relates to the parking along North Road Terrace. We're pleased to learn that the applicant has reconsidered the original parking proposals to North Road Terrace for parents drop-off and pick-up. However, the amended scheme still shows 12 parking spaces in this area and is off the development site. Why do we think the additional parking along North Road Terrace is a concern? North Road Terrace is a narrow private road, further restricted in width due to resident parking. It's a no-through road. The junction at Wentworth Street has a bus stop, bad sight lines due to trees, and close proximity to St. John's Junction opposite. There's a narrow footpath running along parallel with the existing parking spaces, and the applicant has not demonstrated that there would not be a serious impact or safety issues in accordance with the National Planning Policy Framework. We note Mr. Elliott, your highway officer, raised some similar concerns on how the parking in this area would work. Therefore, the applicant needs to consider the current situation and how this private road is actually being used as a narrow one-way street, rather than assuming the road as a two-way width highway. We would urge the committee and the council review the content of our expert highway engineers' technical letters sent on the 2nd of March 2020 and 20th of March 2020 and the 2nd of March 2021, which highlight several deficiencies in the proposals relating to the use of North Road Terrace. Generating additional parking along this road will create safety concerns for all concerned and nuisance to residents by the proposed unmanaged parking, causing obstructions to private parking, access to residents' garages and drives. On a final note, we request the applicant reconsiders the proposed parking provision on North Road Terrace by locating them within their site as they've done so for other spaces. Thank you for giving us this opportunity and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Ms. Basil, are there any questions for Mr. Basil? No? Thank you, Mr. Basil.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Our second speaker is Helen Massey. Sure. Ms. Massey, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, good.
You've got 3 minutes and we'll remind you when we get down to 30 seconds.
Thank you. Good
Okay.
morning, everyone. My name's Helen Massey. I'm a lifelong resident of Wakefield and a governor at Wakefield Grammar School Foundation. I speak on behalf of both schools, Queggs and Wakefield Girls High School, for this first phase of the Clayton Hospital development. The principle of redevelopment and demolition of this site has already been established, and for 4 years, our consultants have worked closely with your planning team to overcome any concerns and bring forward this first phase today. We intend to retain the central pavilion of Clayton Hospital and some of the adjoining buildings, which is more than initially anticipated, as we feel it would enhance the locality and acknowledge the prominence that Clayton Hospital held in Wakefield. As the Foundation has been the provider of education for over 430 years in Wakefield, we will strive to ensure this exciting project is a beacon of excellence for which Wakefield will be proud. The time, care and investment given by all parties will ensure that the proposals will be sympathetic to its surroundings and will not only benefit the schools, but also be of benefit to the wider community. The school's governing body are committed to the significant investment this site needs, despite the financial constraints imposed on all of us in recent times. Clayton Hospital sits at a key entry point into the city. Through approving this first phase, the economic benefits and positive message that will be sent out is that Wakefield is a forward-thinking city, and it's a development that the Schools Foundation and Wakefield can be proud of. With your support, this site will create jobs, reverse the decay of a much-loved building, create economic investment, and offer a more pleasant and much improved living, working and learning environment. We hope you will look upon the application favourably, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Massey? No, no questions. Thank you very much, Ms. Massey.
Thank you.
Are there any questions to the officer? No questions? Any comments? Councillor Swift?
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, do I put myself back on video or not, Chair? I can't remember.
You can come in.
Right. Right. I've got 3 questions, Chair. The first is about what the sides of the pavilion will actually look like. In other words, at the moment, what we've got is a building in the middle, and at the moment it butts on, it's got other buildings butting onto it at the side. Now when those buildings are substantially demolished, what do the sides, the flanks actually look like? Which actually is what people from the adjacent main roads will probably see slightly more of than the front of the building. I've got 2 other questions, but that's my first one, Chair.
Okay, come in.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this has been discussed with officers and the Council's Conservation Officer, and there is a condition attached to the outline consent that requires the applicant to submit details of what the enveloping works, if you like, to the building will look like. So the temporary works before the actual building is fully restored. So in terms of the end elevations and any of the openings that were created, there will be blocked up and the applicant to match the appearance of the existing building. I'm sorry?
Can you repeat that? We lost you for a bit there.
Sorry, okay, I'll start again. So there's a condition attached to the outline consent that requires this detail to be submitted and agreed with the council and the conservation officer. But the details that have been submitted as part of this application confirm that the applicant will block up any openings, and that will then be rendered to match the existing building. So I know it maybe doesn't look like that, but some of the more modern extensions to the building are clad and rendered and are not actually built in the same stone as the pavilion building. So it will be essentially rendered to match that. So it will have the appearance of the stone finish, but that will be the temporary works. Does that answer your question?
It answers the question, but we'll come to it later when we're in discussion. To be honest, it doesn't look like the building's going to look very nice, but we'll come back to that later. I've got my answer, thanks. My second question is, what happens to the War Memorial on Wentworth Street?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that one. So the benches that are there at the moment, which will be removed, and the plaques that were on that have been taken away and stored by the school. So they will be incorporated into the development if the families of those people on those plaques want that to be done, and the school are in conversation with the families concerned about whether or not that needs, whether they want that to be incorporated into the development.
Chair, I do think we need to clarify this. I asked this question when we gave the outline permission and didn't get an answer then. What we've got on Wentworth Street is the original Wakefield War Memorial, the one that preceded the one that's opposite County Hall, and it's set back a little bit. It's set back a little bit from the street on Wentworth Street, and it's a question of what happens to it.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear some of what you said there.
Right, I'll say it again. On Wentworth Street, what we've got is the remainder of the original Wakefield War Memorial, the one that preceded the big one that's opposite County Hall now. And it's set back a little bit off the street, it's recessed. And I mean, I'm not saying there's a lot left of it, but that's what it is. And I think we do need to sort out what happens to it, so that it doesn't just end up being obliterated, Chair. My third question, is that I think it's on page 20, on agenda page 25. Third paragraph down, the paragraph begins, on balance, it is considered, etc., etc. I'm wondering if Ruth could kind of briefly spell out what the, when she says on balance, I wonder if she could briefly set out what the kind of the negative bits are, what the downside bits are that she thinks that on balance are offset by the positive aspects. That's it, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. The War Memorial, that has been secured. The details of that do need to be submitted, and that's secured by condition on the outline. And this is just an application for the enabling phase. So those details do need to be submitted in terms of how it will be incorporated into this development in future. So that is covered by condition. In terms of the negatives, I mean, I think this is broadly positive in terms of an improvement to the site. As we've set out, there are some elements of car parking in there and hard standing, but those will be enhanced by the soft landscaping around the site, the provision of the boulevard and opening up the views through the site and between the two schools on either end. So a lot of the site is in a fairly poor state of repair at the moment, so demolition of those buildings are definitely a positive. As I've said, the retention of the pavilion is now larger than it was proposed at the outline stage, so we are keeping more of the building than was previously intended. So on balance, it is definitely a positive development and will enhance the conservation area. And in terms of some of the concerns raised by Historic England about how the site would be viewed between the phases of development, the development parcels will be laid to grass, and there is landscaping around the site which will protect the appearance of the conservation area and the wider heritage assets in this location. Is that answering your question?
It doesn't answer the second question at all, actually, but nonetheless, thank you for the response, Chair.
What Ruth is saying is that that will come in on the next phase. It has to be decided on conditions for the memorial.
Yeah, sorry, the response in respect of the War Memorial is entirely satisfactory, Chair.
Okay, then, thank you. No.
Chair.
Yes, Councillor.
Can you hear me, Chair? A consideration to electrical charging points and for future reference. Is there any mention of this in this planning application?
That would have been something that was covered under the outline consent.
Right, thank you.
Any further questions? And then we will now go to the vote. Can I ask Claire? Can I ask members to turn the cameras on, please?
Chair, do we not get a chance of discussion?
Well, I asked if there were any questions and comments, and nobody come back. There's only you and Stuart come up for questions, because I asked for comments and then you come back with a question. If you want to comment, then
yeah,
Councillor Swift, that's fine. We'll do that before Claire takes the vote.
Yeah, Chair, I mean, I was pursuing the questions for clarification first before we got into discussion. I am genuinely worried about the information that was provided about the appearance of the remaining main pavilion, because the type of stonework finish you've got on that is it's not like a plain Dashler finish. You know, the kind of thing you've got on, say, like on County Hall. I'm trying to think of the technical word, but it's kind of in plain. It's in neat layers of stone, but it's kind of like got a slightly rough finish. Now, I honestly think you really will struggle to get a rendered finish that would actually match the front appearance of that building. I mean, I know this is the kind of thing that it's more difficult to deal with in a discussion like this. It's the kind of thing that would have been much easier to talk about if we were back with having site visits. But I honestly don't see how we're going to get a rendered finish. I don't know whether there's anything that can be displayed that would show what that finish is like from the submitted drawings. But I can't remember ever having seen a rendered finish that would match the appearance, the existing appearance of the stonework of that central pavilion.
The parts of, shall I answer that, Chair?
Yeah, that's what just coming in.
Yeah, okay, thank you. There are parts of the building that are modern extensions that do have a rendered finish. So it's a fake finish. It looks like it is fake stone. So it looks like the original hospital pavilion, but it isn't. It's got a cladding finish on it, a rendered finish. So it is used on other elements of the hospital already, but those details do need to be submitted in full to discharge a condition attached to the outline consent, and those discussions are still taking place with the applicant to confirm the final details.
Is it, I mean, I take the point about it being further submission, Chair, understood, but I wouldn't like those further discussions to be prejudiced by anything that's in this particular permission. Is it possible to have the reference to rendered, to a rendered finish on the sides of the pavilion? Is it possible to have that part taken out so that the discussions about the finish on the flanks of the building can actually be dealt with without it being prejudiced by reference to rendering in any current approval from today?
Can I just clarify, Councillor? Are you saying that you would want the finish to be stone, that you would want them to construct the ends of the building in stone?
I'm not I don't have a fixed view on that particular point, Ruth, and I take your point that you've got, you know, you've got discussion still to happen. I don't know what the sides of the building will actually look like when you've demolished the bits that are up against it, you know, as to what we're left with. The existing render, for example, the kind of render you've got on the back of the building at the Wentworth Street end, I mean, those are all going to be demolished. And I wouldn't have thought that most people would regard some of those extensions as being particularly in keeping with the better parts of the building anyway. But yeah, I would prefer that for the sake of making progress today, but not tying our hands for discussions that are still to come. I think I would prefer it that the materials and finish for the flanks of the pavilion to be retained, that those aspects of the current application were removed before we give any approval.
Any further comments from anyone? No. And then we will go to the vote. Can I ask Claire to come back in again, please? And go through names. Can I ask members to put their videos on, please, and the mic when they are answering the call? I know we've got some that can't join by video link, so that's okay. Say that the officer's recommendation is for approval. Can I have that moved?
Moving, Chair.
Seconded, Chair, then.
Thank you. Can I ask now that Claire takes the vote, please?
Okay, Chair, I'll go through each councillor by name, starting with Councillor Ellis.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Swift.
Against.
Councillor Tennant-King.
For.
Councillor Wallace.
For.
Councillor Whitehouse.
For.
Councillor Williams.
For.
Councillor Heptinstall.
For.
Councillor Pickin. Okay, Chair, to confirm, that's 8 votes for, 1 against, no abstentions.
Thank you, Claire. I've just knocked my mic off. That is carried, and we will have some discussions later, Kevin, to make sure that we get the descriptions of the building that you would like.
Thanks, Chair.
Welcome. So now can I ask that we just take a 5-minute break, please, and so while we change over presenters. Okay. Thank you. Before we start agenda item 2, we have Councillor Taylor joining us at this one, and Councillor Harvey. We are now on agenda item 2, and that is the full plan application for development, storage and distribution warehouse, Stanley and Outward. I will let Michael Eagleston to do the presentation. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just bring up the presentation. So thank you. This is a full planning application for the development of land north of Newmarket Lane in Stanley. So the application is for development of a large warehouse, and there would be associated infrastructure, including the creation of a new link road, which would serve as the industrial estate spine road, but also a new link road between Aberford Road and Newmarket Lane to the east. There's also associated drainage infrastructure, landscaping infrastructure. The recommendation is for approval. So the purpose of this presentation is to take you through the site with reference to a series of photos and describe the development with reference to a series of plans, and then just briefly describe the main issues associated with the assessment of the application. The detailed assessment is set out in the committee report, and this presentation isn't designed to amend or supplement that. There's also additional information which has been circulated to members, which describes some addition to the committee report in terms of the assessment of a specific element of additional greenbelt development, which wasn't mentioned in the report. I'll refer to that in this presentation. So as I say, the development is land north of Newmarket Lane. The view one that you can see on the slide before you is along Newmarket Lane, adjacent to the properties to the southwest of the development. View 2 is it shows you both an access that goes behind the properties on Newmarket Lane to southwest, and also an agricultural access track which currently goes through the development site. Originally this location was also proposed for the main access for the site, or rather a location close to this, slightly to the east. However, that was amended as part of negotiation, and there's now a single centralised access proposed. So the third photograph that you can see is along the current route of the agricultural access track, which transects the site. As I say, this would be diverted, and the area of land you can see on the photo would comprise part of the warehouse, more specifically the parking area to the west of the warehouse. Photograph 4 shows you there's a footpath Stanley 73 runs immediately to the west of the warehouse plot, effectively runs up through the old colliery area up to roundabout junction 30 of the M62. That's shown on photograph 4. There's a watercourse that runs adjacent to the site, effectively down a kind of a small wooded valley, which corresponds with wildlife habitat network, which runs, if you can see my cursor, down this area adjacent to the site. And photograph 5 shows you a photograph of one of the open sections of that watercourse. As you can see, it's quite a small watercourse. Photograph 6 shows the location of footpath Rothwell 35, which also transects the site. So this marker shows where the access is, which is here. So this footpath runs up the site and across to this accommodation bridge of the M62. This bridge of the M62 is used mainly as the agricultural access, but also doubles as this footpath route north into Leeds, which then runs down through the site onto Newmarket Lane and then across south of the site in an area that's proposed to provide as a attenuation pond, and then linking down to a bridleway which runs south adjacent to the New Cold site to the Transpennine Trail, which runs a short distance to the site, east-west. So the seventh photograph is that area that I just briefly described, which is where there'd be an attenuation pond provided near to the new cold facility, where footpath Rockville 35 runs. The view number 8 is looking across the site towards where there's a methane gas electricity generation compound. As you can see, it's quite well screened by trees. And there's also adjacent high voltage transmission lines which run along the southern edge of the site. And photograph 10 just shows looking up the site to the highest point, which is roughly the location where that accommodation bridge is. This is viewed from the bottom end of the footpath, Rockville 35. And view 10 just shows how Newmarket Lane continues to the east with a dog leg and then running along to Methley Lanes. Then view 11 is looking across the site from this far eastern edge, just above the group of properties that are to the southeast of the site. And view 12 looks across the site in the other direction along the line of the high voltage lines towards the M62, which you probably can't really make out, but there's a vehicle there on the M62 to the east. And so view 13 is where the proposed new link road would go. The proposal would extend the existing facility and effectively take it up parallel and to the south of Newmarket Lane, and then link through to Newmarket Lane to the east. And this view is the land that would be taken up by that new access. View 14 shows the properties, is on the edge of the properties to the southeast, looking up towards where the warehouse would be situated. And then view 15 is just these properties to the southeast of the site. So the site area is on this aerial photograph that you can see here. You can see the new cold facility, which is obviously a significant local landmark, 42-metre high cold food warehouse, which is the only development currently on the site, although there is a further development in construction to the south of the warehouse. And you can see the red line area includes the main development plot, which would be occupied by the warehouse, also the existing new cold access road, which isn't yet adopted, although it is built to adoptable standards, but would need some remedial works before it could be adopted. And then the land required for the access roundabout, which would be in this location, and the new link road, which would run parallel to Newmarket Lane. And then this slide just shows you the employment allocation. So this site is primarily within employment site ES10. Employment site ES10 was included in the development plan when produced in 2012. And it's for 51 hectares of B8 employment uses. So it's specifically for the development of B8 warehouses. And it's part of 95 hectares of land identified as being required on the M62 corridor to provide for warehousing facilities along that corridor. And this is the red line plan provided by the applicant, which is on an OS base, which effectively shows the same thing. So you can see there's some land excluded, which is effectively the residential land to the southeast, the gas generation compound and an area to the east of that, and then a parcel of what is woodland in this area. So this is a drawing which just illustrates an overall master plan for the site, which the applicant has recently updated and which was requested by our spatial policy team so that we could understand how the current proposal would relate to the full delivery of the land. This shows the land. So this shows the actual proposal site, which is this plot to the north of Newmarket Lane, and this is the warehouse that is currently under consideration. It shows how the new link road would go through, and so that all the section of new link road and the roundabout junction would be provided as part of the plot 4 application. But it also indicatively shows how the additional plots which have not yet been developed could be served off this link road, including plot 6, which is to the south of Newmarket Lane, the remainder of land to the east of plot 4, and also those are the plots within the employment site. There's also an indication of development on land to the west, which is currently within the green belt, and therefore that's not something that is particularly relevant to us, as we're concerned with the development of the employment site rather than the unallocated land. So this is the site plan transposed onto a landscape plan for the development. The development itself is a large warehouse with approximately 180,000 square metres of floor space within a building envelope that would be provided on 4 different floors. So it makes an efficient use of that land in terms of the amount of floor space which would be delivered over the footprint. As you can see, there's substantial landscaping illustrated, including landscaping within the new roundabout, 3 attenuation ponds provided, and big blocks of woodland, scrub, and species-rich grassland provided around the periphery of the site. Internally, the site would be provided with a substantial car park, internal HGV circulation, and loading docks to the east and north of the site. There'd also be a 6-metre high wall extending from the southern facade of the warehouse to protect the residents to the south, as well as an attenuation bund just to the north of the residents to the south. There's 2 accesses provided. There's a central roundabout access, which provide the primary HGV access and the access to the car park. There would also be a secondary HGV access provided to the east, which may either be in seasonal infrequent use or used at peak times. It could theoretically be used in any way, and the applicants have tested noise impacts, etc., against that, but the stated intention is for that to be a secondary access. So that would have a 4-metre acoustic barrier along its western margin. So these are the building elevations. It would generally extend to about 22.5 metres. There would be protrusions up to more like 25 metres for the stair cores that provide roof access. Externally, it would very much take the form of a rectangular large building with a tonal grey cladding system with different profiles, including flat panels and profile metal. The applicants intentionally provided some cladding detailing, including the contrasting grey tones of grey, the contrasting texture of the cladding, and also some blue trim detailing. These are the sections that illustrate the development. So there'd be a major cut and fill exercise with the areas of the site being 20 metres higher than the low. External areas would still be at a certain grade, and they'd be retaining to the north and to the south, comprising a mixture of stabilised embankments and retaining walls. So this plan just shows you the development plots that were previously numbered through the previous outline planning consent. So as many of you may be aware, there was an outline planning permission granted for both employment site ES10 and also the Greenbelt land to the west back in 2012, shortly before the adoption of the local plan. Sorry, shortly after the adoption of local plan that allocated employment site ES10. So that allocated the land into different development plots, and you can see the plot reference in here, just in case members have any queries about which plot is which, effectively. So the last slides I'll show are an artistic impression of what would be the warehouse facility provided by the applicant. This just illustrates the approximate form, massing, and appearance of the development, and the application of materials. So I'll leave the layout plan on the slide, and I'll just briefly run through the main issues. So I've described the site to you and the development, which is essentially of a substantial large B8 warehouse, which would run on a 24-hour basis. There have been 50 representations submitted on the application, including 49 objections and one neutral. The neutral representation is from another landowner that has interest in other employment land to the west of Aberford Road. The objections essentially focus on the loss of this greenfield site, which it is a greenfield site, but it is allocated for warehousing development in the development plan, and also the local environmental effects of the development in terms of noise, additional disruption, and the additional traffic that would be generated by the development, including the concern there may be additional traffic through Methley lanes to the east. The comments are included in a fuller form in the committee report. So in terms of the planning policy principle position, as I say, the land is part of allocated employment site ES10. There is a small part of the land which is within the green belt, which I'll just refer back to this plan. So this part of the land here is within the green belt, and this part here is within the green belt. So so originally the applicant proposed to provide the primary access road in this location, which is why the location plan is drawn like that. As I say, the application's been revised to remove that, and the only development that would occur to the west of the site now is the diversion of this farm track, which would be diverted around the limits of the site. And there will be a section of it which would be in the greenbelt here. However, it's not considered that would be an appropriate development in the greenbelt, as the National Planning Policy Framework makes allowance for engineering operations to be undertaken in the greenbelt, providing they're consistent with greenbelt purposes and don't materially affect openness. And this is considered to be the case here. The other short section of greenbelt development, which is reported in the additional information which has been provided, is in this location. So upon more detailed review, it was ascertained that that there's an area of greenbelt that intrudes within employment site ES10, which was formerly allocated as a local wildlife site. That local wildlife site allocation has been rescinded since, and there's no longer a Newmarket colliery local wildlife site. However, the site allocation remains with this area excluded from the employment site and retained in the greenbelt. Therefore, the application has to be assessed on that basis. So there'll be an approximately 20-metre section of the new link road. I'll just show you with reference to this plan. So this approximately this area here would be within the greenbelt, and also part of this spur down to plot 7. And there would be a bridging structure over the small watercourse, or rather it be culverted, and there'd be an earthwork solution to provide for necessary gradients of the road of the small watercourse. However, for the reasons set out in the additional information, again, it's not considered that this small area of greenbelt development would constitute inappropriate development, given that it's for a short section of a link road that would necessarily be required to access land, to enable full access of the employment site, and given the relatively small scale of the associated structures. So the policy position is essentially that the development is acceptable in principle, as it comprises development of a warehouse on land allocated for warehousing. As per previous applications, there is no reference within employment site ES10 to the development of any community infrastructure, such as the community stadium, which was previously proposed to be provided as part of the outline planning permission. Therefore, there's no requirement for the developer of this plot to make any allowance for the delivery of that infrastructure. The applicant has indicated there will be around 1,500 jobs created by the development. There's no named occupier. However, they've deduced the approximate job creation based on the footprint of the unit, the floor space of the unit. The applicants also produced a framework employment and skills plan through which they've made certain commitments to attempt to recruit local people who have difficulties accessing the workplace, and uplift skills for their employees. And I believe my colleague, Mr. Denby, is present at the meeting, who may be able to answer questions on that if members have any specific questions about the nature of the employment generation or the ways in which that would be optimised. So the development's acceptable in principle, as advised by the planning service. In terms of design and landscaping, the warehouse would be a very large structure that would be within a greenfield site. However, the land is allocated, and therefore there's an acceptance that this landscape will change over time. It's further considered that the design of the development is acceptable in terms of the level of landscaping proposed, which is substantial, and the treatment of the building. So although it's accepted that the landscape will change and will not change for the better, that change is accepted, and it's accepted that the development has done what could reasonably be required to minimise harm through providing a well-designed building in a well-landscaped setting. In terms of human health and noise impact issues, the main concern of the Planning Service and the Environmental Health Service related initially to the proposed western access route, which was very close to the to adjacent residential dwellings. So I'll just refer back to this plan probably best illustrates it. So the originally proposed western access, we're going to go in this location. Environmental Health and ourselves raised concerns about this solution as it would take a lot of HGV traffic very close to adjacent residents. So instead, the applicant has reverted to, or rather changed to, a central access solution, whereby there'd be a roundabout provided in this location, and both car park and primary HGV access would be provided in this location, which is further from adjacent residents. They've also proposed to mitigate impact through the provision of acoustic fencing as in the locations which I've described previously, to the east here, to the south of the yard here, and to the west of the secondary access. So subject Environmental Health have advised that and also the lighting provisions. Environmental Health has advised that development wouldn't cause unacceptable impacts on adjacent residents, and that's the recommendation in the report before you. In terms of traffic and transportation issues, my colleague Adrian Piggott is here to answer any specific questions on that. But essentially, the transportation impacts of the development being assessed through a detailed transport assessment, which has been reviewed, and then further information provided, and subject to the mitigation. It's considered that the transport and traffic impacts of development would not be unacceptable. The mitigation would include this new link road, the new junctions, some improvement to the existing junction between Castlegate and Aberford Road. There's a specific issue with rights of way, obviously, with the diversion being required of footpath Rothwell 35, which currently transects the site. However, the rights of way team have advised that the alternative provision proposed in this application, which essentially comprises, so currently the footpath runs approximately along the line traced by my hand, which I hope you can see. So the alternative provision is to provide footpaths around the perimeter of the site, both to the east and to the west, and then also upgrade the link through to the bridleway to the south. So rights of way are advised that this alternative provision is acceptable and would mitigate the harm caused by the loss of the current route of footpath Rothwell 35, and rights of way provisions in the application are acceptable and overcome the harm. In terms of ecology and biodiversity, there is a substantial landscaping scheme proposed as part of the application, including planting of 1.2 hectares of woodland and additional woodland edge and scrub planting and hedgerows, which would mean that there would be an increase in hedgerows provided on the site. However, there would be a biodiversity net loss. The applicant proposes to mitigate that net loss through a substantial contribution to off-site ecological enhancement, which would go towards the Northern Forest project for off-site planting of woodland. Subject to that mitigation, it's considered that the ecological impacts have been successfully addressed. In terms of flood risk and drainage, the sites in Flood Zone 1, which is sustainable urban drainage proposed about the application in the form of the free attenuation ponds you can see. There'd also be attenuation tanks beneath some of the car parking areas. And there'd be 2 points of outfall, both of which would be watercourses. There'd be outfall to a watercourse which runs under the M62 to the east, and there'd also be an outfall to the watercourse that transects the site, that runs to the southwest of the site. With outfall on this location, and it's considered that that there's no flood risk or drainage issues of concern in terms of the application. So those are the key matters. The other point I'd quickly make is in terms of air quality and renewable energy. So the applicant has proposed a scheme of mitigation for both the climate change impacts of the development and the air quality impacts. That would include a roof-mounted photovoltaic array, the provision of electric vehicle charging, and also transportation planning measures in the provision of a £250,000 contribution to sustainable transportation. So that's the main issues associated with the application. The recommendation is for approval, subject to the prior engrossment of a Section 106 agreement with the heads of terms set out in the report, and also the planning conditions recommended in the report. So I'll end my presentation there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Michael. We have one speaker registered, Mr. Steve Harley.
Thank you, Chair.
3 minutes, Mr. Harley, and we'll remind you when you get down to 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair, and good morning. Your officer's report comprehensively sets out the planning position relating to these proposals and reaches a clear and positive recommendation. I don't wish to cover the same ground, but would like to make a few key points. The scheme before you has been developed following a collaborative approach with the Council's officers. The proposals respond directly to strong market interest in the proposed building, and the proposed building would secure the investment of a specific occupier keen to locate to Wakefield. The former Newmarket Colliery site has already seen investment and job creation, with this and other plots now also coming forward. Further add to the momentum now behind the broader allocated employment site as a key focus of economic activity and investment in Wakefield. These proposals would deliver new high-quality employment space and a significant number of new jobs, as you've just heard, around 1,500 are expected, in logistics and distribution, a priority economic growth sector in the area, and on a site which the Council has allocated for such uses. The proposed building and access roads are on the allocated site outside the Greenbelt, as you've just heard, and as confirmed by your officers, there is no conflict with Greenbelt policy. The application includes an environmental impact assessment covering an agreed range of relevant topics. There has been extensive consultation with all relevant consultees and much constructive dialogue with officers across the Council. A wide range of mitigation and design measures are proposed to minimise or reduce the likely effects on the locality. As set out in the report, the proposals would not result in any unacceptable impacts on the amenity of local residents, such as with regard to noise, air quality or lighting effects, and would not have any unacceptable or severe transport impacts. A number of highways works and improvements are proposed, including to keep commercial traffic away from Newmarket Lane and to improve local connectivity and links to the rights-of-way, and Michael's presentation gave you a good overview of that. So in summary, the proposals accord with the development plan and would deliver a range of local benefits. The proposed development will deliver against all relevant local plan objectives and policies. This includes LDF policy ES10, which allocates the site for employment development and encourages distribution and logistics activity. We have worked closely with officers to agree a set of draft planning conditions and Section 106 obligations, which will mitigate any effects of the development and secure a quality outcome. This includes measures to deliver local employment skills and training measures, and with regard to ensuring local accessibility to the site and job opportunities. If permission is granted, the intention is for work to begin immediately on site, with the building required by an occupier by September of next year. We hope and trust this application will be welcomed by members as a positive boost and investment in the local economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Harley, please? Well, no questions.
Yeah.
Councillor Swift.
Yes, Chair. I'd like to ask the speaker, who I'm assuming is speaking on behalf of the developer, although it wasn't made clear. I'd like to ask them to talk a little bit about public transport in relation to in relation to the scheme. The details say an estimated 1,500 employees. The details also talk about it being a 24-hour operation. So we're presumably talking about obviously shifts and catering for employees from very big employment sites who are kind of starting and finishing at slightly awkward times. So I wonder if the gentleman could actually tell us a bit about how he thinks the development will function in relation to, utilisation of public transport as opposed to cars.
Happy to. Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you for the question. Yeah, it's clearly an important issue and critical to the occupier as well as to yourselves in terms of ensuring that local people can get to the site and access the jobs. That's as important to them as it would be to you. I mean, there are a number of components to this. I mean, there are already a number of bus services running past the site, both on Newmarket Lane and primarily on Aberford Road. But as Michael referred to, we've agreed a number of things through either conditions and or Section 106 heads, which are being finalised now and obviously be finalised post any resolution today. That includes a contribution to be used and informed through discussions with the council and bus operators, for example, to define a detailed strategy for new, either enhanced bus services or new bus services to serve the site. And the occupier is required to produce a detailed travel plan as well. So as the detail comes through of those shifts, and you're right, as a 24-hour operation, clearly there would be a shift component to this. The detail will come as they know more about how those shifts would work, the numbers of people they're moving around. And I think there'll be a range of responses to that. So as I say, could be new and enhanced bus services, almost certainly will feature bus. The site's accessible from a range of communities already within sensible walking and cycling distances. And as we've heard, there are numerous enhancements to existing routes and new foot and cycle links, for example, along the Link Road, as well as Newmarket Lane, which will become a much quieter route and an attractive route for walking and cycling. So through the travel plan and, as I say, there's the Section 106 measures and the funding that's being committed to, the detail will come, Councillor, through those routes.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Tisdale. Councillor Tisdale.
Thank you, Chair. If my memory serves me right, it's plot 4 north of Newmarket Lane. On the plan we're looking at, which is Newmarket Lane Stanley, plot 4, landscape plan. In this site, there are 2 mine shafts and a drift in that area. Is there a developer aware of these shafts and this drift? And could he please point out roughly on this plan where those shafts and that drift are situated? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. All I can say on that is that a full ground investigation has been undertaken as part of the environmental impact assessment. I'm actually not aware of the detail of any shafts on site. I think they're off-site. Actually, I think our evidence is that they aren't on plot 4. They may be very close to plot 4, and you may know better than me, Councillor. But as far as I'm concerned, there are no such constraints or concerns around those sorts of features on this plot. But we've, as I say, we've assessed through ground investigations this site.
Chair, with your permission, could I put that same questions to an officer, please? The location of the 2 shafts and the drift.
So for you, Chair. So there's been a detailed ground investigation and geotechnical assessment and coal mining risk assessment of the site that didn't identify any mine shafts on the site. They also boreholed the site to a depth of 50 metres, as well as doing the trial trenching, and referring to the historic coal records, and also consulting the coal authority. So unfortunately, Councillor, I'm not aware of these specific features which you mentioned. Obviously, the main part of the colliery did lie to the west of this site. So the colliery, hopefully you can see what I'm showing on the screen here.
Yes,
the colliery.
See, Michael. Yes, yes, yeah.
Yeah. So the main colliery area lay to the west. As far as I understand it, this and we've referenced the submitted geotechnical reports. This land did not contain any mine shafts, and the coal authority are satisfied that that is the case as well. So apologies, I can't show you the specific features. There are maps appended to the submitted geotechnical assessment, which I could pull out if required, and find those. But yeah, that's to the best of my knowledge that is the case. And as I say, these geotechnical assessments have been, and mining risk assessment have been submitted and peer reviewed by both our own land quality team and also the coal authority. So as a planning service, we've got no concerns that they aren't robust or that there are any features on the site that haven't been correctly identified.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question for Mr. Harley. The application states the aim is to recruit 75% of the workforce, particularly warehouse operatives, from a defined catchment. The catchment area will be discussed and agreed with the authority. This could be in the form of an agreed drive time or defined catchment map. So I just want to know, this catchment area, before we can make an informative decision, what area are you thinking of define for this purpose of the job creation? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, again, this is clearly, and it partly links back to the point I made under public transport. The ability to get local people to the opportunities created on site is really important. And with that in mind, we've worked closely with Mr. Denby and the wider economic development team around a skills and employment framework, which you're quoting from there, and it's summarised in the committee report. I mean, I think at this stage it genuinely hasn't been defined, but it absolutely would be informed by and through discussions with the council. I mean, I think that, not to oversimplify it, Councillor, it would be a local area defined, focused on around urban Wakefield. But how far and wide it goes, I think is genuinely open to discussion through in the final form of that employment and skills plan, which, as I say, has to be agreed with you before it's approved. So the intention is to, as you say, to target very strongly through a whole range of joint working with Job Centre Plus and others, the local communities across Wakefield, to ensure that the benefits are genuinely local in terms of employment and the upskilling that's expected through that employment and skills plan.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Mr. Rowley? No, thank you, Mr. Rowley.
Thank you, Chair.
Any questions for Michael Eggleston? No, any comments? Councillor Swift?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Taking the existing new cold building as a benchmark, what's the actual ground level on which this new building would actually be constructed? I mean, I'm obviously trying to kind of form a view as to just how prominent this building's going to be in the wider landscape. Now, obviously, we know from the details that it's proposed to be about 70 foot high, but I'm not quite certain what the level of the ground is on which it's perched to, you know, to do a comparison.
So for you, Chair, the level of the development platform would be about 10 metres higher in places at the most extreme than the area around Newmarket Lane to the south. The land generally falls to the south, although there are local undulations, and also there's a small valley that transects the site. So the level of new cold is not dissimilar to Newmarket Lane, but is a little lower. I don't have the figures to hand, but I could find those if required. But essentially, if you wanted to relate it to, for instance, standing on Newmarket Lane, then what you would essentially see is a landscaped embankment going up to 10 metres at its highest, with the high voltage transmission lines transecting it. And then set back from that to a certain extent would then be the 22.5 metre mass of the building. That would be set within a softened landscape setting, which would include retained trees and substantial new blocks of woodland. And obviously, depending on your viewpoint, there would also be other structures which would either be seen within the context of, such as the high voltage transmission lines and the M62 and the existing new coal building, or would obscure the view to a certain degree. So I'd say it really depends on your viewpoint as to what you'd see. There's a full set of photomontages submitted with the application, which suggests that the views of the site would, from a large number of viewpoints, would be relatively limited, albeit from certain viewpoints, the building would be extremely substantial. Sorry, that goes a little further than your question, Councillor Swift, which was, strictly speaking, what was the difference in level, and that's 10 metres at the most, I believe, from Newmarket Lane. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It may come out later, but what I'm trying to assess is what the landscape impact would be, for example, from the City Fields development, from Ferry Lane, and from viewpoints in Outwood, so that where you're actually looking across the valley, and those viewpoints from which at the moment the new cold building is very, very obtrusive. So that's where I'm coming from. Thanks, Chair.
Could I just quickly make a point there, Chair, if that's okay?
That's okay, Michael.
I was just going to say that there's a full landscape and visual impact assessment submitted. I haven't included the viewpoints in this application because essentially a lot of the longer range viewpoints, they've done photo montages, show that the building wouldn't be a significant strong feature in many views, particularly given its juxtaposition with the new coal building. The new coal building is approximately twice as high, and understand there'd be a level difference, but there's also these screening features. But if Councillor Swift would like to see the photo montages, then I could try and bring them on screen if that was wanted.
Yes, please.
Okay, just bear with me a second. Right, so I'll just bring what I think are the correct photo montages on screen. Sorry, I'm just trying to find the ones which actually illustrate the building in photomontage. So I believe these are the existing viewpoints. Just bear with me for a second. Right, yes, so I've located them. Apologies for the slight delay. So this would be one of the most immediate views of the site. This is from the properties to the southeast. So I hope you can see what I can see on my screen. If you can, please let me know. But this is from a property to the southeast. This is one of the photomontages. So this is what you currently see. This is what the photomontage suggests you would see once development has taken place. And then this is with the landscape in place. So that isn't entirely helpful viewpoint because there's some obscuration by adjacent trees. So this is a view from next to the M62. So again, this is what you would see currently. This is what the development you would see with the development, and then this is what they suggest you would see with the landscape in place. I'll just pull up a couple more, which I think contain some longer distance views. So this is from the River Calder, which is to the south of the site. So this is what I mean with some of the viewpoints not being particularly relevant to show on the presentation, because they show that there wouldn't be a strong presence. So from this viewpoint, you can see the development in place behind the existing tree line. So Newcold is much more obvious, but you can just see the roof line of the proposed new building. I'll just pull up the rest of them just for completeness. Please stop me if you've seen enough. So again, this is from the Transpennine Trail. So this is with Newcold, without the development, and then it shows with the development in place. Obviously, you can't see very much because Newcold is obscuring the view. So this is, I believe, a viewpoint within Stanley to the southwest, and you can see Newcold in the background. This is without the development. You can see the HV transmission lines, and then this is with the development. So there's also more pronounced difference there. So this maybe is a useful viewpoint in juxtaposing the two buildings with the white Newcold in this location and the proposed new warehouse here. There's just a couple more that illustrate this relationship. So again, yeah, so we're looking here across the site along the line of electricity pylons, and you can juxtapose the new warehouse with the existing Newcold building. And then there's just one more after this. So I think this is the sort of view that Councillor Swift was wanting to see. So here, there's quite difficult to see change. So this is a Newcold building. You can just about make out the additional building in this location. As you can see, the Newcold is a much more striking and influential landscape element from a large range of viewpoints, just because of its height. Yeah, so this is one where the building sits in front of the Newcold. So you can see that it goes from a view with Newcastle in the background with the woodland to a layering effect with the new warehouse added in. So those are the photo montages that are provided. I hope that provides you with some more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And any further questions for Michael? There's no comments. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to know whether we have a chance to actually ask questions at the end to the officer, or we should ask now, or should we later?
No, it's now, Councillor Harvey.
Sorry?
Now it's Michael that's speaking, so he's the officer that's speaking.
Okay, so Michael, can I ask a question about the biodiversity gain itself? Yeah. So so you probably aware that the council has just declared a biodiversity emergency crisis. As stated in the document of biodiversity metric calculation document, the wooded water course is protected as part of the Wakefield Habitat Network and the local plan policy D4. A section south of Newmarket Lane is also protected as a local wildlife site, which is protected under local policy D6. So the same biodiversity plan speaks about how there's net gain of habitats once the warehouse being built. So they will be leading to a net gain of biodiversity. But however, this does not appear to account for the fact that there will be increased traffic in the area, as well as noise and lighting and everything. And it is mentioned also a suitable plan, a scheme will be negotiated with Wakefield Council to target the biodiversity net gain. So why has this not already been discussed prior to the application? Because how can we be expected to give an objective view on the application if there's no open, if there is open-ended statement such as this? Because we need to know what exactly the scheme will look like at this stage. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. So for you, Chair, the applicant has submitted a detailed landscaping scheme and ecological assessments as part of the application. What's being proposed to be reserved for final approval is a final biodiversity enhancement plan. So that allows any adjustments to be made to that landscaping scheme, but it would have to be in general conformity with what is proposed. So essentially, this situation on site is that there would be some ecological loss and harm as described by Councillor Harvey. So there would be approximately 0.23 hectares of the wildlife habitat network would be lost as part of the development. There'd also be loss of hedgerows and other elements of woodland, and all that's set out in section 8.6 of the report. However, the landscaping scheme does propose mitigation. So there are lots of different elements of mitigation. One of them is providing for the sections where the watercourse would have to be culverted to go under the road, providing for those culverts to be provided with bedding material and dimensions that would allow species to pass through them. There's also provision of nesting boxes, etc. But the main mitigation is the planting of woodland, which would be about 1.2 hectares, which would be planted. And there'd also be species-rich hedgerows, and in total there'd be about 3,291 metres of those. And also the attenuation ponds will be provided as habitats. So it's obviously quite complex to assess the harm versus loss, but the ecologists essentially advise us that the level of mitigation and compensation is proportionate to the loss. Obviously, the main area of loss is improved agricultural fields. The more significant elements are the wildlife habitat network. But in terms of quantifying it through a biodiversity net gain calculation. The net gain calculation has been done based on the detailed assessment of the habitats currently on the site, the level of loss that the development would cause, and then the level of enhancement shown in the landscaping scheme, which, as I say, is detailed, albeit there would be further detail reserved for approval. And the biodiversity net gain calculation finds that in terms of total habitat units, which is basically the areas of all the different habitats on the site, there would be a 23.6% net loss of habitat units. So that needs to be compensated for, but the policy framework does allow that to be compensated for where allocated development comes forward and can't achieve an on-site net gain, which will obviously often be the case, because where you're developing a greenfield site with a large employment development, it will often be quite challenging to achieve an on-site gain. So in those cases, developers are allowed to compensate off-site within the policy framework. And in this instance, they've proposed a sum of £253,900 pounds and 80 pence for off-site improvement in the form of contributing towards a Northern Forest programme. There are other parts of the development that will actually result in on-site enhancement, and that would include hedgerows, which would increase by 102.2%, and also water-based habitat units, which would increase by 16.1%. So it's to some extent quite a complex pattern of harm versus benefit. However, overall, as explained in section 8.6 of the report, we believe that the compensation mitigation proposed does compensate for the habitat loss, and that the habitat loss has been reduced and mitigated to a reasonable degree. I would also just quickly add the loss was significantly reduced from what was originally proposed, because originally there was proposed to be a western access, which would have gone through additional parts of the wildlife habitat network, resulted in additional loss in this part of the site. So the actual final solution is much less harmful than what was originally submitted. So I hope that answers the question.
Sorry, Michael, yes and no, because given what you said about the complex pattern of the habitat network and given the size of the development itself, so I'll quote you again, that a suitable scheme will be negotiated with Wakefield Council. Would be better after have that negotiation conducted, done, and have the assessment and know exactly where we stand before the members approve this application. Because the biodiversity crisis has been declared in the region, in our district, only last month. We need to know the implication, the impact. It will have a massive impact on the ward of Stanley and the adjacent area. So I don't believe that we need to leave this as open-ended before we actually can prove the application.
Well, I believe I've explained that it isn't open-ended, and there is, sorry for the rustling of papers, there is a very significant amount of detail which has been submitted. There are precise details of the level of ecological harm and the proposed compensatory habitats, and you can see them on the slide before you here. So these darker areas here are retained woodland. These green areas with tree indications are blocks of woodland planting. These are species-rich grassland areas, and there are other components that are proposed. So we do know precisely what is proposed, and if nothing else was proposed, then this is what would result. The point of reserving it by planning condition is for any final tweaks and enhancements to be made before the scheme is actually implemented, which is usually considered to be the correct approach. But it's often difficult to go down to the minute level of detail that it's a good idea to go into before finalising the scheme. I think if you refer to the actual planning condition, it references the landscaping plan which has been submitted, so it would be in general conformity with that. It's just there would be a certain level of additional detail which would be agreed with the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, West Yorkshire Ecology and any other relevant stakeholders before the scheme was finalised. We could adjust the condition to just approve the landscaping plan and not require any further details, because there is sufficient detail in the landscaping plan do that if you so wished, but I wouldn't suggest that that would be a very good idea in terms of what our normal approach to these things. Thank you.
Michael, as I've said, that we do need to have this plan in a comprehensive details before we can actually decide whether this land should be developed as a warehouse, storage place, because we need to look into the biodiversity crisis that we have declared and make sure that we do as we speak. So I do feel like the plan itself, the scheme, should be published and know exactly how we calculate the net compensation of the net gain and net loss of biodiversity crisis. And before we do that, we probably don't think that the resident of Wakefield wanted to will have the confidence in the knowledge that the committee does not discharge its duty where we don't even know what exactly the environmental impact this is going to have on the district.
I just repeat that we do have that information that is published on the website. It's been submitted. Before you can see the plan submitted. There's also more detailed plans sitting beneath that and a detailed landscaping specification. So all that information is provided. It's just that I'm suggesting a planning condition to allow some further negotiation of that following the decision. If you wish to strike that out and just approve the landscaping plan as it is, then that's perfectly possible, and there is sufficient level of detail to do that. Thank you.
Chair, can I also ask another question, please? Yeah. Okay, so Michael, there is 10% of the on-site workers will be hired from Wakefield. That's all is being stated in the application. So what number of people does this commit to? This is not quite enough people being hired from Wakefield itself. And I also have asked a question about the employment, the framework for the employment and skills plan. It exists, but there's no full plan at all on the portal at the moment for us to be able to consider all of the different aspects with a different job can bring to the district, and how we are going to be able to actually assess or evaluate the impact, economic impact for this development if we don't have those data in place. And I understand there is a construction phase plan states that the number of jobs available, including training, about 6 workers gaining the NVQ, but 6 workers getting NVQ and a few apprenticeships does not seem to be enough for such a big development. Thank you.
So I just said the 10% I think refers to the construction plan that's been submitted. There would be final approval of those plans reserved by the planning condition. I think one of the issues with construction is there's a lot of specialist requirements, in terms of piling, etc., and constructing the steel framework of the building, ground workers contract. So it's hard to guarantee that a large proportion of those will come from the local area. What's been submitted is essentially the sort of plan that we've accepted on other sites, which commits to working with the council, providing a certain level of local employment and providing NVQ opportunities, etc. I think it would be quite difficult to go much further than that. However, we could seek some additional assurances if that was considered to be required. In terms of the employment skills plan for the final occupant following the construction phase, there isn't a final occupant named in the application, so it's not possible to go to further detail on that at this stage because there is no occupant, and that will quite often be the case for a development of this kind. And in those situations, you quite naturally have to reserve the full detail by planning condition, and in this case, Section 106 obligation. What we have saw is some overarching commitments to, in terms of the quoted 75% recruitment from a defined area, and in terms of working with various stakeholders to recruit people from disadvantaged backgrounds, etc. My colleague, Mr. Denby, may be able to expand on all that if that would be considered helpful.
Please, thank you.
Okay. Is that okay, Chair? Is Mike Denby?
Sorry, Mike, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor. Yes, when we met with both the construction company and the applicant as well, when it came to the question around apprenticeships, that is actually higher than the average standard of percentage of the workforce for number of apprentices that's recruited at any one time. And it's worth noting as well, when we did challenge those numbers, these are sustainable apprenticeship numbers and not shared apprenticeship numbers. So all of those apprenticeships will go on to a long-term sustainable employment opportunity. With regards to the framework that we've developed thus far, we are confident that we can then, moving forward, put a lot more detail around that. And as Michael said, the Section 106 will allow us to be able to identify the impact measures moving forward. But understanding the operator and other sites, we are confident that it will add economic value to Wakefield and its residents.
Mike, can I just ask you whether we have this 10% of the on-site workers and as opposed to recruit 75% of the catchment area, which we have not been defined. So could you just expand on this, clarify how many exactly will be eventually employed from this application? Thank you.
I think the 10% of the workers relates to the construction phase. Because it is expected that a number of skills will be required to come across from a bigger geography. But in terms of the 75% of the workers, we've looked at the occupiers' previous of working with local authorities in the catchment areas, and it would be anticipated that around 75% of workers would be recruited from a Wakefield geography.
Thank you, Mike.
Right, no more questions or comments? Councillor Swift?
Yes, Chair. Apologies, it's something I should have asked Michael earlier. The nearest thing we've got for this overall site to an overall scheme for Newmarket Lane was the original outline permission from whenever it was, about 2013. Now, that contained a height limit. Now, as a guideline to, a broad policy approach to a height limit, how does this scheme compare to the height limit that was in the original outline?
It's about 4 metres higher.
Thanks, Chair.
No more questions or comments? No, then I will now go to the vote. Claire, are you ready to take the numbers? Can I ask members?
Chair.
Thank you. Can I ask members to put the video on? No. Just say that, therefore, the officer's recommendation is for approval. Do I have that moved?
Move it, Chair.
Seconded.
Second it, Chair.
Right, Claire, can you now take the vote, please?
Okay, Chair. I'll begin with Councillor Ellis.
For.
Councillor Harvey.
Against.
Councillor Swift.
For.
Councillor Taylor.
Against.
Councillor Tennant-King.
For.
Councillor Wallace. Councillor Whitehouse.
For.
Councillor Williams.
Abstain.
Councillor Heptinstall.
For.
Councillor Pickin. Okay, Chair, that's 7 votes for, 2 against and 1 abstention.
Thank you, Claire. And that is carried. The application has been approved with conditions that we've already got attached. We'll say we will now take a 5-minute break while we just get ready for the next presentation. Gregor, can I ask you? Thank you, Abigail. Agenda item 3 is just for the reasons for refusal for for the last one for Pope Street. So over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just pull up the presentation, although I'll just leave it on the site plan just for reference purposes. So the application was previously considered at the Planning and Highways Committee meeting of the 18th of March, where it was resolved that the application should be refused. The council's constitution requires that in these instances the application goes back for reasons for refusals to be debated and finalised at the subsequent committee. So what's provided in the committee report pack before you is a assessment of the stated reasons for refusal against the tests of relevancy, reasonableness and clarity. So I won't repeat the information set out in the committee report, but essentially the report advises that the committee may obviously decide to refuse the application for whichever of the reasons or all of the reasons that they consider to be appropriate. However, officers would suggest that the reason for refusal for the reason on flood risk and drainage grounds may warrant further consideration and potential omission just based on the lack of technical evidence that the scheme would not function to mitigate flood risk. However, that is a matter for committee members to consider for themselves, but I hope the material provided in the committee report is helpful in doing that. So there's no essential recommendation, and the options are the committee may resolve to determine the application for any of the reasons or all of the reasons. However, an option which officers would present would be omitting that reason refusal for in particular. Thank you, Chair.
Right, Ian, we'll just have a word now. You pause.
Hi, Councillor. So just to be clear, when we go to the vote, we're going to vote on two different options. Option A is to refuse permission for the Pope Street application for all 5 of the reasons that members set out at the previous meeting. And option B will be to refuse for 4 of the reasons, and the one that will be omitted, as Michael said, is the proposed drainage reason for refusal. So we vote for either option A or option B, please. Thank you. And I'll hand over to Claire.
Are you right, Claire?
Yes, Chair. So just to clarify, I'm asking members to vote for either A or B.
Yes.
Okay, I'll go through all councillors by name, starting with Councillor Ellis.
B.
Councillor Harvey.
B.
Councillor Scott.
B.
Councillor Swift.
Chair, just remind us which one includes drainage? Is it A or B?
A.
Right. Sorry, again?
A.
Right. I'll go for B then.
Councillor Taylor.
I'm abstaining because I wasn't here at the last meeting.
Councillor Tennant-King.
B, please.
Councillor Wallace.
For option B.
Councillor Williams.
Option B, please.
Councillor Heptonstall,
Option B, please.
Councillor Pickin,
Option B.
Okay, Chair, so that's 9 votes in favour of option B and 1 abstention.
Everybody, that's option B is the preferred reason for refusal, which will now go through. So thank you very much. That is the end of the committee today. So can I ask Gregor to stop the live stream, please?